All right, now we're ready to stick everything in the case. Output shaft has its reluctor gear on there. Put bushings everywhere. I needed to put bushings. Center support's fully assembled. Got the Sonex Smart Shells inner race in there in place of the factory one. So let's go ahead and pile everything on in. Okay, I already installed the low reverse piston and return spring assembly. I mean, you've seen that in other videos, so it's fairly straightforward. Just use your compressor tool, and then you know, make sure that all of your locking tabs on that snap ring are fully engaged. Other than that, I mean, that's really it. So our bearing. I'm not going to put any rear end plate shims on this, at least not at the moment. Okay, then our 5-pinion rear planet, OEM GM. I've heard mixed things about the aftermarket planets. I've heard builders, you know, on the internet talk about them failing. I've heard that from a couple of builder friends of my own. So I personally would not install them, but the parts place where I get all of my hard parts and, you know, all my kits and whatnot, they say they sell them by the truckload. So I guess kind of draw your own conclusions, but for high performance, for anything high stakes, I really default to OEM. Alright, here's our low reverse wave plate. That little tab with the notch cut in it needs to be at the roughly 530 position. That's where the lug is. And then you have your bottom steel, same situation. And then steel friction, steel friction, steel friction, or friction steel, friction steel, friction steel, until you run out of them, and then you put the center support back in there. Of course, you don't want to forget your anti-clunk spring. You could soak the planets in fresh transmission fluid as well. Certainly no harm in doing that. This thing's not going to actually be running and driving for quite some time, so you know, by time that, you know, that point where it's ready to go back on the road rolls around, you know, I guess pun intended, no pun intended, all the fluid will have drained into the pan from the planet. Alright, so here's your anti-clunk spring. And then I have a separate video exclusively on the Sonex Smart Shell, and it shows the installation of the race. You want these lugs to be facing rearward. Okay, so you'll see that they're not contiguous like the factory piece. They're only on the bottom, so they need to be facing down. There's the word front kind of laser engraved in the front. And then for all your new low roller clutches, these little tabs here, you see how they're kind of open and there's gaps between them, they face up. You want to make sure that when this goes back in, the inner race turns clockwise, okay, when you're holding the center support body. If it's not, if it's backwards, you're not going to go anywhere. Okay, this sprag clutch is only holding, or I should say low roller clutch, is only holding in first gear, and that's manual low, that's drive free, it's, you know, regular overdrive. So if, you know, you're driving along and then suddenly you lose all movement in forward gear, and that includes when you put the thing in manual low, then suspect the low roller clutch has failed, and that's really rare. Like I said, I think I've seen, you know, I would say less than 10. It's got to be less than 10 of those things failing. All right, your sun gear, the wide bushing. And then you want to install a snap ring. So with the snap ring, you want the ends to be on either side of the anti-clunk spring. All right, you install this snap ring such that, you know, one of the ends is overlapping, especially on this side. Like if it looks like this, you know, and you got it in there like that, then chances are it's going to pop out. So you want to make absolutely sure that your ends are on either side of that anti-clunk spring. And you can install case savers as well. And I'm going to do everything I can to prevent this thing from moving anymore. There we go. If it doesn't install like this, you know, when you put it in, just use like your screwdriver and then your hammer and, you know, tap it this way or the other way, no matter, you know, whichever way you have to tap it so that it doesn't overlap. Okay, bearings for sun shell. So the bearing that comes with the smart shell is going to go like this. Alright, and that reminds me, we probably should air check the low reverse clutch pack, so I'll do that now. Alright, that sounds good. Like I said, there's a lot of air coming out of this nozzle. It's, you know, it's really not technically a nozzle. I don't know what it is. I think it's like a, you know, some sort of vacuum connector or whatever. I need to replace my nozzle. I guess that's where what I'm really trying to say here. Okay, reaction shaft slash front ring gear. Okay, make sure your bushings are lubed. Okay, when you spin that ring gear, it should spin freely clockwise and lock counterclockwise. Now, if you do soak your frictions, it's not going to spin anywhere nearly as freely as this. You're going to have to make you know, pretty decent effort to turn it, but you know, the frictions aren't soaked, so it spins nice and free. Okay, if you're so inclined, go ahead and lube up your teeth on the ring gear. And then we'll drop in our front planet. Again, if this was going back on the road, you might soak it. But I include a priming procedure with all my rebuilds. So basically, instructions are such that, assuming they're followed, and I'll know if they're not, but assuming they're followed, everything in this transmission will be thoroughly saturated with fluid. All the clutches will be soaked in, planets will be soaked in, band will be adequately soaked. I mean, there won't be any issues. Alright, now we got to do the output shaft. So let's see how this goes. Got to come down from underneath. Now I just use my foot. And hopefully the camera's catching this. I see something here. Okay, after further review, I think I may have found the problem. So we have two different bearings here. They look the same, but they're not. This one is slightly narrower in diameter, smaller in diameter than this one. This is the bearing that I've been trying to use in the, for the ring gear for the front planet. So here's the assembly, ring gear reaction shaft. And you'll notice that bearing does not go all the way in there. It's too big for the pocket. This bearing, on the other hand, goes right in there. I'm going to put it in fluid real quick. I'm going to drop in the planet. Okay, see the extent of protrusion, the top of the planet from the top of the ring gear here? It's a lot lower. So when we go to spline everything together, I have plenty of exposure there for the snap ring, which I did not have when the other bearing was installed. So, in case of user error, yeah, it happens. But if you run into a similar situation, now you know what to look for. So, I'm going to put our output bearing back on. Put our planet back in. Actually, let me grab this, and then I'll glue it to the back side of the planet. When I tried everything, I replaced both bushings. I tried installing a different output shaft, just a factory shaft. Maybe it was the the aftermarket shaft that was the problem, but that didn't work either. I was about to swap ring gears when I realized that the bearing was too wide. All right, that should work now. All right, so now I'm going to grab my snap ring pliers and snap ring and reinstall the output shaft and hopefully fully seat this snap ring into the groove. Okay, appears to be good to go. All right, now we'll go ahead and install the drums and the band, and then we're going to test fit the servo to see what, if anything, we have to do to the pin. If we have to grind anything off or if it's okay as is. I just make sure that everything's fully seated and splined on to their respective lugs and the 3/4 clutch pack and forward hub. Sun shell's fully engaged properly with the reverse input drum, and if that's the case, The top surface here of the drum should be about a half a finger's width below the deck surface of the case, the pumped case. Alright, now I'm ready to deal with the pump. First I want to test fit the pump. So I'm going to install the gasket, and I'm just going to install it dry. Because, like I said earlier, I have absolutely no idea where I'm at with respect to end play. So I don't want to lube everything up and act as if I'm installing things for the final time. It just makes a mess and it's harder to deal with coming back out. So already confirmed that this pump will drop right in. It's properly aligned. So at this point, all we want to do is tighten and torque a couple of bolts to spec and see where we're at. I mean, that's really it. So for this initial test, I'm just going to use 15 foot-pounds. For final torque, I mean, you can go 15 too, that's fine. I've never ever had one, you know, come loose, at least as far as I know, but I typically do 18 foot-pounds on the final torque. All right, I'm just going to lift up on it with my hand, see what happens. All right, so we are kind of close enough to where, if this was a factory build, I would probably let it slide, but this is too much end play for a high performance build. So I'm going to set up the dial indicator so that I can actually take an end play reading, because you know, drums will have to come out, and then I'll have to measure the thickness of that selective spacer and then find something that's, you know, whatever thicker by whatever amount to get the end play where I want it. All right, so let me reposition camera and then we'll do the preliminary end play check. Hey, let's take a measurement. All right, it's coming in right at 47,000, so I actually have a long way to go. So let me reset everything. I'm going to need to take everything out and put a new washer and some spacers in there, or some shims rather. I have everything back out, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to measure the number 70 washer that came out of here. Now, what I've decided to do is actually install some of these rear shims that Sonics makes, where you can adjust end play via the rear ring gear. So we got 50 thousandths. I want to make up 35 thousandths. So let's see what kind of thickness we had to start with, and it looks like we're at 95 thousandths thick. So we need to add an additional roughly 40 thousandths worth of travel for the entirety of this, you know, rotating assembly, if you will, so that we can end up at around 15 thou or so for end play in the front. So let me do that, get everything out of the case, and then I'll show you the shims, and then we'll, you know, proceed with putting everything back in. I'm not going to film that part of it because, well, obviously I've already done that. We'll pick back up when it's time to measure the end play again. Alright, so 50 thousandths of end play, 95 thousandths thick spacer, so we need to make up 40 thou. Okay, so these are the spacers themselves, and let's see what they measure. You know, I got like packing cosmoline or some sort of grease on them, so I'm gonna have to clean that off. Looking for one that is not stuck to the others. So it looks like these are 10 thousandths shims. So assuming they're all 10 thousandths, here's two that are stuck together. So it's 20 thousandths, that's 30 thousandths. And then one more makes 40. So that should give us 15 thou of end play. So what you want to do is take off your rear bearing, stick your shims on, and we'll paste a whole bunch of assembly lube, hold the bearing, and hopefully this solves our problems. Now, you know, this is kind of the deal when working with high performance applications. You know, you sometimes have to work to get your end play right and get your servo travel right. You know, you're dealing with non-factory parts in many cases, so it is what it is. It just takes more effort. All right, let me pile everything back in. You know, we'll bring you back when we're, you know, ready to check end play in the front again. And I'm using this spare 4x4 output shaft to knock out the anti-clunk spring, or knock the center support past the anti-clunk spring. I'm not beating on the billet steel shaft. Okay, finally have everything back together. Pumps installed for the final time. All bolts are torqued to 18 foot-pounds. We have the dial indicators set up and zeroed. So now we're going to do a final end play check and cross our fingers, hope it's where we need it to be. Ideally, I'd like to be between 10 and maybe most 18 thousandths of an inch, but we'll see. Now, normally you use vice grips on this, but I mean, I don't want to mar up the shaft. I mean, yeah, it looks too nice. All right, I'm seeing 15 thousandths. Let me zero it in so you could see it too. And I meant to say zoom in. It looks like 15 or 16 thousandths of an inch. That is minimum spec for as far as the factory is concerned, and it's kind of right in the sweet spot where I would like it to be. 10 thousandths to 20 thou is my target range for anything high performance, and you know, we're within that range. So took a few iterations, some shims down on the rear ring gear, and then different thickness spacer for the, you know, selective washer and the input drum, but it's where it needs to be. I mean, you know, like I said, if this was factory, and I know I said if this was factory, I'd let that first thing ride. I mean, I shouldn't have said that. That was, I guess, you know, a little too off the cuff, but, you know, that was like 50 thousandths of an inch. Factory, if you're upwards in that 30 to 35 thou range, just in a stock level build, that's fine. That's not going to hurt the transmission. But if you're, you know, doing anything beyond that, I'd say let's stick to anywhere from between 15 and 25 thou for mild performance, and 15 to 20 thou for anything that's, you know, wild and crazy. So anyway, I'm gonna go ahead and just assemble the rest of this thing. Like I said, the rest of it is largely the same procedure, you know, bolt and valve body on and spacer plate and all that stuff. Air checking the case, you've seen that. I may film that just to have it as a standalone video, but the only other that should wrap up this, you know, this portion of the video. And if you have any questions, go ahead and leave them below. As always, I appreciate your time. I appreciate your viewership and your patience. You know, this took some iterations, but like I said, if you're going to build one of these for performance, just kind of go in expecting to have to deal with the kinds of things that you saw here. All right, thanks for watching.